You're standing in a room filled with people, some laughing, others whispering behind hands. A few locked in silent power struggles you can feel in the air like static before a storm. You speak, and half the room nods. The other half watches, waiting, not for your words, but for your next move. Every word you say, every gesture, every moment of stillness is currency, and the room is your marketplace. But there's a problem. The rules of this market are invisible. They shift, they're brutal, and most importantly, they are never what they seem. Now imagine realizing this late. Imagine living your whole life thinking power comes from goodness, fairness, or merit, only to learn far too late that the world isn't a meritocracy, it's a masquerade, and those who understand the mask control the room. You are taught that honesty is noble, vulnerability is strength, and playing fair will earn you respect, but deep down something has always felt off. Haven't you seen the charming manipulator rise while the sincere one fades? The cunning admired while the moral is mocked? Haven't you felt the sting of being overlooked, underestimated, or betrayed, not because you weren't good enough, but because you didn't know the game? There's a phrase attributed to Machiavelli, twisted by time but laced with truth. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Most dismiss it as ruthless. But what if it's not just a statement about rulers and empires? What if it's a mirror reflecting the unspoken truth about modern life? What if power, real power, isn't about domination, but about understanding the levers hidden beneath the surface of human behavior? Now think about your daily existence. How often do you tailor your speech to avoid judgment? How many decisions are driven by fear of rejection or the need for approval? You edit yourself at work. You shrink your ambition in relationships. You smile when you want to scream and say it's fine when it's not. And worse, you convince yourself it's maturity, that this compromise is wisdom, that self-erasure is strength. But what if that's not maturity, it's submission? Machiavelli was not a monster. He was a surgeon of human nature, cold, precise, and unwilling to look away from the wounds we pretend aren't there. He saw what others refuse to see, that behind every noble ideal is a darker impulse, behind every kind gesture, a calculation, behind every throne, a dagger, and behind every smile, a silent negotiation of power. Is there a way to walk the Machiavellian tightrope to see the world as it is, not as it should be, and still retain your soul? Or is this the ultimate curse of awareness, that to understand power is to forever carry the burden of using it? We are about to descend into the psychology of this invisible game, where every person is both predator and prey, saint and schemer, a world where virtue becomes camouflage, and domination wears the smile of diplomacy. But to see it clearly, you'll need to do something few ever do. You must unlearn everything you were taught about morality, leadership, and control. You must be willing to step into the dark, because only in the dark does real vision begin. And so we ask, what really holds power in the modern world? Truth or illusion? Integrity or perception? The person or the mask? We begin with the hidden problem, buried not in politics or history, but in the very psychology that governs your every move. Power in the modern world isn't earned. It's curated. It isn't seized with brute force. It's absorbed like oxygen through performance. But where does this obsession with performance begin? And why is it so effective? To answer this, we have to leave behind the myths of modern society, the cheerful slogans, the virtue signaling, the fake smiles plastered across corporate meetings, and dive into the basement of the human psyche, where our true fears, cravings, and patterns reside. Let's start with a truth most can't admit. People don't want the truth. They want the feeling of truth. They don't want leadership. They want the illusion of certainty. They don't want freedom. They want a safe cage with the illusion of choice. This is why Machiavellianism endures, not because it's dark, but because it's honest about the darkness that already exists. According to Carl Jung, every human being carries a shadow, a repressed part of the self that contains everything we deny: rage, ambition, lust for control, manipulation, even cruelty. We bury these traits because society tells us they're wrong, and so we suppress them. But the shadow doesn't disappear. It festers. Eventually it finds its way out, not in healthy expression, but in passive aggression, power games, virtue signaling, and moral superiority. You see this daily. The coworker who smiles too much but undermines you in meetings. The lover who preaches vulnerability but weaponizes your insecurities. The leader who says we're all equal while hoarding control. These are people trapped in denial of their shadow, playing purity on the surface but secretly grasping for dominance beneath it. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago, not with neuroscience but with brutal clarity. People are not guided by morality. They are guided by desire and fear. This was echoed centuries later by Friedrich Nietzsche, who wrote that behind all human action is the will to power. Even acts of kindness, he argued, often mask deeper motives: to be seen, to feel morally superior, to avoid guilt. And here's where it gets dangerous. Because we live in a culture that worships image over essence, our collective shadow has metastasized into something worse, a society-wide addiction to performance. Your social media bio is more important than your soul. Your brand matters more than your character. Even your pain must be curated into a digestible post. We now live in what Jean Baudrillard called a simulacrum, a reality replaced by symbols and images, where the image becomes more real than the thing itself. A world where the illusion of power is more effective than actual power. It's no longer about being wise. It's about appearing emotionally intelligent. Not about being generous, but about posting your charity. Not about leading, but about looking like a leader. So how do you survive in such a world without becoming fake? How do you maintain authenticity without being devoured? The answer lies not in idealism, but in confronting the truth of your own psyche. Viktor Frankl once said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." But what if the first change required is this: to stop pretending you're above the game? Because whether you acknowledge it or not, you're already playing it. Every time you smile when you don't want to. Every time you shrink to avoid making others uncomfortable. Every time you speak in a way that pleases but doesn't express. Every time you hide your ambition so people won't call you arrogant. That is the game. The difference between the powerless and the powerful isn't that one plays and the other doesn't. It's that the powerful play consciously. They know the stage is fake, but they control the script. They know the crowd is fickle, but they don't depend on its applause. They know people say, "I want honesty," but flinch when they hear it raw. The powerful don't lie for pleasure. They lie strategically. They don't manipulate out of insecurity. They manipulate to survive and ascend. Schopenhauer once wrote that life is suffering, and the best we can do is master the suffering with grace. But what if the deeper truth is this? Life is a power play, and your only freedom lies in how consciously you engage with it. Here's where psychology, philosophy, and society converge into a singular problem. We are all trapped between who we are and who we must appear to be. This gap, the chasm between essence and image, creates endless internal tension, anxiety, guilt, identity crises, social fatigue, the pressure to be seen, liked, shared, understood, and on brand. It exhausts the soul, and yet few escape it, because the price of stepping outside the illusion is loneliness. To be real is to risk being misunderstood. To be unapologetic is to be called arrogant. To pursue power openly is to be labeled dangerous. So we compromise. We become half versions of ourselves, not quite fake, but never whole. We drift between authenticity and strategy, like a politician learning to cry on cue. And we justify it by calling it adulthood. But adulthood is not betrayal. Adulthood is not the murder of the inner rebel. True adulthood is integration, the merging of the shadow with the self, the mind with the instinct, the ideal with the strategy. It is the realization that Machiavelli is not your enemy. He is your map, a map not to cruelty but to clarity, not to manipulation but to awareness, not to domination but to freedom. Freedom from the illusion that playing nice is enough in a world that rewards precision, perception, and strategic courage. You feel it now, don't you? That tension in your chest, that old uncomfortable truth rising from your gut. You've been pretending not to know how the world really works, but now you can't unsee it. Now you must decide what to do with it. And as we move forward, we will examine what happens when we don't, when we ignore this hidden truth, and live our lives as if sincerity alone will save us. We'll see the consequences, not just in your own story, but in society at large, because the game doesn't stop when you refuse to play, it just plays you harder. You wake up one morning and feel hollow, not broken, not in pain, just eerily disconnected, like you're performing the role of a person instead of actually being one. You scroll through your phone, you reply to messages, you go to work, you smile, you laugh, you say, "I'm good, thanks." And yet somewhere beneath the surface, there's a quiet scream. You've done everything right. You've followed the rules. You've been kind. You've worked hard. You've made yourself likable. You've fit in. And still, something's missing. That's not coincidence. It's consequence. When you suppress your instincts in the name of image, when you trade rawness for relatability, and when you betray your shadow to appear nice, the cost is not just exhaustion, it's disintegration. You slowly become a ghost in your own life. Let's call it what it is. You are punished for your authenticity and rewarded for your manipulation, not by some villainous overlord, but by the architecture of modern society itself. We are living in a system that reinforces illusions and starves the soul. This begins early. Schools reward obedience, not curiosity. Corporations promote conformity, not courage. Social media celebrates virality, not virtue. And culture trains you to fear judgment more than insignificance. So what happens when a person continually edits themselves to fit in? You develop what psychologists call ego depletion. The constant monitoring, adjusting, and regulating of your behavior drains your mental energy, leading to fatigue, anxiety, and loss of clarity. The brain, designed for presence and instinct, becomes trapped in analysis and social calculation. Over time, this chronic self-monitoring shapes your identity itself. You stop asking, "What do I want?" and start asking, "What will they like?" Your preferences become performances. Your desires become diluted. Your sense of self becomes fragmented. This is how you end up with millions of people in modern society who are hyper-socialized but deeply lonely, surrounded by others but never fully known, connected to everyone, yet alienated from themselves. And this disconnection has ripple effects far beyond individual psychology. Societal decay begins when authenticity is punished and artifice is rewarded. We create influencers who have no expertise. We elect leaders who play personas better than they lead. We build careers on optics instead of substance. We chase popularity over truth, safety over growth, dopamine over depth, and worst of all, we start believing the lie. This is where the illusion cements itself, not just socially, but neurologically. Because the brain is plastic, it adapts to what it experiences repeatedly. If you repeatedly hide your anger, your brain wires itself to suppress emotion, even when expression is needed. If you repeatedly manipulate for approval, your brain begins to equate deceit with survival. If you constantly act fine when you're not, your nervous system learns to numb discomfort instead of confront it. The longer you pretend, the more your performance becomes your prison. We are not just pretending for others, we are pretending for ourselves. And pretending is addictive. It gives you a high acceptance, attention, applause. But the calm down is brutal, because no matter how loved your mask is, you know deep down, it isn't you. And here's the Machiavellian twist. You are exploitable precisely because you try to be good. The very traits society claims to value, trust, humility, vulnerability, are the very ones weaponized against you. You open up, they ghost you. You forgive, they exploit you. You play fair, they cut corners. You try to connect, they study you, like a chessboard. This is not paranoia, it's pattern recognition. Because in every social group, in every workplace, in every digital space, there are those who understand the power of perception. They know how to smile while stealing credit. They know how to flatter while manipulating. They know how to hide behind moral posturing while climbing the ladder of influence. These people rise not because they're inherently better, but because they don't resist the game. And if you continue pretending the game doesn't exist, you become their pawn. This is the unseen consequence of avoiding Machiavellian insight. You don't stay innocent. You become controlled. By the charismatic boss who uses empathy as leverage. By the ex-partner who knew how to mirror your wounds. By the media that feeds on outrage instead of truth. By a world that gives you a stage then punishes you for forgetting your lines. So what do? You can't opt out. You can't isolate. You can't force the world to be more honest. What you can do is become aware, to stop moralizing power and start studying it, to stop waiting for fairness and start wielding clarity, to stop performing for approval and start moving with intention. The cost of awareness is discomfort. But the cost of denial is your life being shaped by those who are more strategic than you. Carl Jung warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." So let's be clear. If you're unhappy, unfulfilled, or unheard, it may not be because you're weak or unlucky. It may be because you're still operating on an outdated belief that truth speaks for itself. It doesn't. Truth must be weaponized. Authenticity must be armored. And power must be understood not as evil, but as essential. Because if you don't hold the sword, someone else will. And they might smile while holding it to your throat. It's not just your job, not just your relationships, not just your social standing. It's your mindset, your inner architecture, being quietly shaped by a system that rewards the mask more than the man. You cannot remain naive. Not anymore. Because once you see the machine behind the curtain, once you understand the mechanisms of manipulation, once you feel the dissonance between your image and your instinct, there is no going back. You must make a decision. Will you continue playing a part in a play you didn't write? Or will you seize the script, rewrite your role, and become something more? This is the beginning of your rebellion. Not loud, not violent, but precise, psychological, and permanent. And in the next section, we'll map that rebellion step by step, not by rejecting power, but by reclaiming it. It doesn't begin with a battle cry. It begins in silence. Not the silence of surrender, but of awakening. The moment you stop playing the role, the moment you stop asking permission, the moment the curtain drops, and for the first time you see the architecture of power, not as something external, but something that was always inside you, dormant. That's where the rebellion starts, not with the world, but with you. It begins by reclaiming the parts of yourself you buried to survive, that ambition you silenced so you wouldn't seem too much, that cold clarity you repressed so others wouldn't call you heartless, that strategic instinct you ignored so you could feel morally pure. Bring them back, not to dominate but to integrate. This is not about becoming ruthless, it's about becoming whole. Because the truth is, they already use strategy. They already understand optics. They already build alliances in shadows. While speaking of transparency in the light, you're not rising to their level. You're remembering that you've always had the capacity to do the same and more. But to do that, you must strip the old belief systems down to the bone. Belief number 1. Power corrupts. No. Power reveals. It reveals who is hiding. It reveals the architecture of one's inner world. The insecure crave it to fill a void. The unaware abuse it because they never integrated their shadow. But for the conscious, power is not poison, it's precision. You've been told to fear power because others misused it. But imagine if people with clarity, depth, and moral complexity stopped fearing it and started mastering it. Wouldn't the world be ruled by better players? Belief 2. Be authentic at all costs. Authenticity without awareness is self-sabotage. Truth without timing is suicide. You can be honest and unstrategic. You can be open and naive. You can be real and still get crushed. The rebellion means understanding that authenticity and strategy are not enemies. They're allies. They are the yin and yang of influence. So don't kill your authenticity. Weaponize it. Don't hide your truth. Refine its delivery. Don't suppress your instincts. Sharpen them. Think of it like this. The sword is your truth. The sheath is your strategy. Carry both, always. Belief 3. Good people will be rewarded. No. Good performances are rewarded. The real reward doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being undeniable, from being so tuned into human nature, so fluent in the unspoken dynamics of social interaction that approval becomes irrelevant, influence becomes automatic. That is the beginning of personal sovereignty, when your power no longer depends on applause. Now let's go further, into the rebellion's practical tools. 1 point. Adopt strategic detachment. This doesn't mean becoming cold. It means becoming observant. Every room you walk into, is a theater of emotional agendas, unspoken hierarchies, invisible fears, and unmet needs. Stop taking things personally. Start seeing the game. Your boss criticizes you. Maybe it's not about you. It's about his insecurity. Your friend ghosts you. Maybe your growth reminded her of her stagnation. Someone talks down to you. Maybe it's their only way of feeling tall. Detach emotionally. Engage tactically. Be the calm eye in the storm of projections. 2. Master social mirroring. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. People trust what they recognize. If you want influence, become a mirror. Reflect people's language, energy, values, not to manipulate, but to connect with precision. Speak their dialect, then lead them somewhere deeper. When in Rome, speak like a Roman but think like a ruler. 3. Control perception, not just performance. People don't follow truth. They follow belief systems wrapped in emotional resonance. So stop explaining yourself. Craft your narrative. Decide what you want to be perceived as, and build it intentionally. If you want to be seen as grounded, stop apologizing every time you speak. If you want to be seen as a leader, speak last, not first. If you want to be respected, say less, but make every word land. Power isn't loud, it's selective. 4. Use rejection as data. Every time you're excluded, overlooked, underestimated, that's intel, not a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of the map you need to redraw. Ask, what was I signaling without realizing it? Where did I give my power away? What boundary did I fail to set? Rejection isn't failure, it's a feedback loop, and feedback is fuel. 5. Study historical strategists, not for imitation, but integration. Read Marcus Aurelius to master internal discipline. Read Machiavelli to understand political survival. Read Sun Tzu to learn positioning. Read Nietzsche to awaken your instinctual power. Read Jung to integrate your subconscious patterns. Your rebellion isn't just emotional, it's intellectual. Upgrade your mental operating system to match the complexity of the modern world. And finally, stop asking, how do I stay safe? Start asking, how do I stay sovereign? Safety is a myth. Reputation is rented. Approval is currency for the poor in spirit. But sovereignty, that quiet, immovable center inside you that sees clearly, speaks deliberately, and acts without apology, that is freedom, that is power, that is your rebellion. Because when you integrate the Machiavellian insight not as manipulation but as clarity of mind and precision of action, you no longer play the game from fear, you play it from awareness. And when awareness meets courage, manipulation becomes impossible. Because no one can exploit the person who sees the strings and chooses to pull their own. This isn't about becoming feared, it's about becoming unfuckwithable, calm in chaos, strategic in silence, authentic but armored, and finally free. But we are not done. There is still one final realization. A truth deeper than strategy, more powerful than rebellion, more terrifying than any manipulation. A truth that reveals why none of this power, performance, rebellion matters at all, unless you grasp what lies at the core of existence itself. In the final chapter, we go there, into the abyss, into the soul, and we uncover the ultimate truth. You've broken the mask. You've seen the game. You've stepped into strategy without shame. But now, at the edge of everything, a question remains. If all of life is performance, power, perception, what then is real? Strip away the applause, strip away the image, strip away even the self you've curated through strategy. What's left? And is that thing worth anything at all? You've been taught that identity is what you build, that legacy is what you leave, that meaning comes from what you master. But what if these are still illusions? Sophisticated illusions, yes. Liberating, maybe, but illusions nonetheless. Let's pause here. Let's step outside the noise, the strategy, the social dynamics, the wins and losses, and confront the question that has haunted philosophers for centuries. What is power, if it still ends in death? Imagine this. You win the game. You dominate. You influence. You ascend. You become everything Machiavelli hinted at, everything society rewards, everything others fear or admire. And yet, one day, your name is forgotten. Your image fades. Your voice stops echoing. The world moves on. Then what was it all for? This is where most people panic. This is where nihilism creeps in, whispering it was meaningless. But that's not the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth isn't that life is meaningless. The ultimate truth is that meaning cannot be outsourced to applause, to legacy, to influence, or even to identity. Meaning is not something you find. Meaning is something you declare. It is an act of rebellion against entropy, a sovereign decision, a poetic defiance. And here lies the final Machiavellian twist, the one even he may not have seen. The greatest power is not to control others, but to define yourself in a world that constantly tries to do it for you. Not for performance, not for applause, not even for results, but as an act of sacred autonomy. To look into the abyss, the endless spiral of uncertainty, judgment, mortality, and say, I still choose to be this. That is the highest form of power. Not the manipulation of the external world, but the authorship of the internal one. Let's go deeper. You are not your performance. That is a layer. You are not your strategy. That is a tool. You are not even your persona. That is a shield. At your core, you are the one who watches, the one who sees the strategies arise, the one who notices the mask forming, the one who feels the hunger for validation, the spike of resentment, the urge to dominate or shrink. You are the awareness beneath it all, and the greatest tragedy is to live your entire life wrapped in strategy without ever returning to that center. That's why so many kings end up hollow, so many influencers burned out, so many high achievers lost. They win the game but forget who played. Because here's the truth that Machiavelli's mirror never showed. If you don't return to your center, power will possess you. You won't use the tools, you'll become one. You won't wear the mask, you'll become it. You won't control the game will consume you. So how do you return? Not through retreat, not by rejecting strategy or influence, but by anchoring it to something deeper than approval, fear, or ego. You return by remembering that the ultimate power is presence, not calculated presence, not curated calm, real presence, the stillness within you that doesn't flinch when the world shifts, that watches without judgment, that acts without ego, that speaks without need. This is the power the world can't measure, the power that doesn't trend but transforms, the power that makes others pause, not because you demanded it, but because you no longer do. This is what the Stoics knew, what Nietzsche hinted at, what Jung buried in shadow, what every mystic, every rebel, every awakened soul eventually discovers. Power is not something you seize, it's something you remember. You don't become powerful by dominating others. You become powerful by refusing to be dominated by culture, by expectation, by illusion, or even by your own fear. And when you do this, not once, but over and over again, moment by moment, something miraculous happens. You stop needing the game. And paradoxically, that's when you start winning it effortlessly. Because the world listens differently to someone who doesn't flinch. It reacts differently to someone who has nothing to prove. It bends around those who know exactly who they are, even if no one applauds them for it. This is your final liberation, not from society, not from performance, but from the lie that you were ever less than powerful in the first place. Now you understand. Machiavelli wasn't teaching you how to manipulate others. He was showing you how the world already manipulates you, and asking if you were willing to see it clearly enough, to finally stop being its puppet. So yes, learn the game, master perception, sharpen your strategy, but return, always return. Return to the still, silent place inside you that needs no permission, no spotlight, no throne, because when you lead from that place, your power becomes untouchable, your influence inevitable, and your life deeply your own. So the question is no longer how do I win? The question is, who am I when the masks fall away? And would I still choose that self even if no one clapped? If the answer is yes, you've already won. You don't need to be feared. You don't need to be loved. You need only one thing, to be whole. Let the world play chess. You be the board.